Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Erica. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. So on the 19th of October in 1896, on a Monday afternoon, Adelaide would for the first time ever see the wonder that was the cinematograph. A presentation would take place at the Theatre Royal in Hindley Street in the CBD. The Express and Telegraph newspaper had run an article on page 2 of the morning newspapers advising its readers that on that very afternoon they would be able to see for the first time in Adelaide the wonder that is the cinematograph. The Theatre Royal was located on the northern side of Hindley Street in the city. It was opened on the 13th of April in 1868, which was actually an Easter Monday. Now, it had been purpose-built for theatre and for vaudeville. Now, this very comprehensive article about the opening is too long to read out, but it does give a really detailed account of the building and its layout, as well as the fixtures and fittings that were used throughout. Words such as luxurious, beauty, ornate are found throughout this article. In the building itself, there were several areas in which to obtain refreshments, an oyster bar, a tobacconist. There would be a billiard room that wasn't ready yet, but it was due to be built or to be completed. And they were going to spend £400, I think, on the billiard tables or on the snooker tables. The building itself, there's some descriptions about the building itself. There were fluted columns, an arched ceiling that had been painted with a representation of Aurora. And of course, this was before electric lighting. So there was gas lighting in place on the walls to light the theatre, as well as a large chandelier hanging from the centre of the ceiling. The architect was the Honourable Thomas English, and the building was built by a Mr. Lynes. Space for about 1,300 patrons, and it was hailed as a great ornament for the city of Adelaide, as good as you would find in the city of Melbourne, it boasts. Now, over the years, it would change hands several times, and it was eventually purchased by the Miller Anderson department store. And sadly, the Theatre Royal was actually demolished in 1962 to allow Miller Andersons to build a car park, which is what's there today in that space. So what is a cinematograph, and what type of wonder should the audience expect to see? The cinematograph was a result of a progression of technology that goes back several hundred years. So in the 15th century, peep boxes or paper peep shows were simple wooden boxes with a small holes in which the viewer would be able to look into to see a hand painted painting or drawing. Now some would actually place a candle behind the image that actually would suggest some sort of movement. It was very basic in the concept, however they did prove to be very popular, and some of these boxes were very elaborate indeed. They were so popular that actually there would be showmen that would simply take these boxes from village to village or from fair to fair, and they would actually charge the patrons to have a look inside their peep boxes. So in the mid-18th century, shadow theatre actually arrived into Europe. Shadow theatre would use the initial concept of the peep box, but by adding in depth or the perception of depth, by using different images in a longer box in which they would position to show like foreground, middle ground, background, etc. They would also sometimes they would use a source of light or sources of light, all to give this perception of movement again. So now we come to the 18th century, and we've got the invention of the photography in the mid-18th century, and this would allow further pushes into technology for film. The mutoscope viewer here that we see is one of those early technologies in film. This allowed the patron to watch moving imagery from photos, and it worked by flicking a row of photos in front of a peephole. So the cinematograph was invented by Auguste and Louis Lumière. They were French brothers, and this was actually a combined camera, projector, etc. So you could actually film with this as well as project what you had filmed, which happened with the Melbourne Cup. It was filmed on the cinematograph and it was shown on the cinematograph. So what made the cinematograph different for the patron was that rather than, say, like the mutoscope, which was a individual experience where you looked into a peephole and you watched why the image was brought to life in front of you by the movement of the flicker of the imagery in front of you, the photography in front of you. The cinematograph was actually a shared experience. You sat next to others whilst you all watched this screen together. So from the cinematograph was first shown to the public on December the 28th, 1895, and here we are in October 1896 in Australia, and the wonder that is the cinematograph is to be shown at the Theatre Royal for the very first time for a matinee performance only at 3 p.m. If you were unable to make that 3 p.m. showing at the Theatre Royal, you could see some evening shows. However, these would actually take place at the Beehive Building, which is at the corner of King William Street and Rundle Street and is still there today. Now, the room was specifically fitted out for the purpose of showing the cinematograph. But it is the Theatre Royal that goes down in history as the first venue in which film as we know it today would be shown to an audience in South Australia. Wybert Reeve was the owner of the Theatre Royal at the time. He was born in London, but he had lived in Australia for many years, and he'd made his living as an actor and as a theatre manager. Reeve, who brought the cinematograph to Adelaide, promised the public that the images reproduced would be the most startling and sensational. The cinematograph was to be exhibited by Messrs. St. Hill and Moody under the direction of Reeve, and it was only to be shown at the Theatre Royal for the matinee performance. So although on the 19th of October in 1896 there was only that matinee showing of the cinematograph, this would not be the only time that the Theatre Royal would play host to the instrument. So this article from the 17th of December 1896 advertises an upcoming exhibition of the cinematograph, which would include pictures of the recently run Melbourne Cup. As I said earlier, the Theatre Royal has a very significant role in the history of South Australian picture theatres, and one in which I thought was worthy of a vlog today. Film history back then, as I said, was very much in its infancy, but as what was happening with film itself, the what actually led to film was actually happening in film. They were pushing the boundaries already. You were getting, there was a film in 1895 called, now you'll need to pardon my French because it's not great, Demolition d'Amour. It's a film in which workers are seen building a wall, demolishing a wall. Demolishing a wall. And then from the magic of film, as it's reversed, the wall reappears. So that was the sort of thing that they were pushing the boundaries of film. You have things like George Millet's Trip to the Moon would come along, and this was a whole period called the cinema of attractions, and that would go from the Lumière brothers, 1895, right up to the very early stages of the studio systems. So once again, thank you for your time. I do hope you enjoyed my vlog. Please like and subscribe if you wish, and I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.